Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's a small group. Um, just before we start, maybe because we're so tiny, just to say hello. So I see everybody. Hi, Magdalena. Ciao. And today I have a topic. I know what I want to talk to you about. But before we start, do you have any questions? Anything that you particularly have? Something you'd like cleared up, so that I can consider that. You can also type it in the chat if it pops up in your head, but I have prepared anyway, so it's going to be a lot. Okay, so welcome everybody. Today I want to talk to you about what I have been speaking through the emails for a while now. And that is, how do we see the forest through the trees, or whichever way that saying goes? Because in aromatherapy, there's just so much information that in my personal journey, it took a lot of education after my education to know what is going on here, what is relevant for me. I felt that I had to go into every topic almost like a PhD, like, okay, now I'm learning about biology, but where does it stop? I am learning about pharmacology, but where do I end as an aromatherapist? Of course, we can study forever, but as an aromatherapist, I want to feel sufficient, confident, and qualified at some point. So this is what I wanted to talk about, because it literally hit me like a month ago. What it is that I'm trying to say all these years. And now I can, I think, articulate myself better. So when that dawned on me, I wanted to share it with you. And today I'm going to use Dropsmart to clear up these things. And I want to start with taxonomy. And I want to tell you that today is more about taking the load off. So we have been, most of us aromatherapists, studying so much. We go to conferences, we read books, we have all these opinions on us. And I felt like I had just such a load off. So what I want to share with you today is some of the load that you can take off, in my perspective, as an aromatherapist, and still be great. And maybe even better if you do not fight the battles that are not yours. I see it like that. Kind of, I think that we are fighting a lot of battles that are not our field at all. So what I'm going to do is go with you through these things that we need to know as aromatherapists, but with the central question, how does this help my client with essential oils? Because I think that's what differentiates us as aromatherapists, and what we can all agree on, that we are always helping a client, but with essential oils. It has to come back to the essential oils. Otherwise, we are entering into herbalism, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can expand that, but just to have that clarity that as an aromatherapist, I do not need to know everything as a herbalist. I do not need to know about teas if I'm not interested. So whatever is that you're learning, I would always ask myself, how does this help me and my client ultimately, whether it is by selling a product or by actually working on the client or consulting a client, but with essential oils? Because they came to me as an aromatherapist, as a professional in essential oils. So I want to answer in the term of essential oil. I can answer like things, what they should eat as well to help themselves, maybe massage, but I am an aromatherapist, so from an aromatherapist's point of view. And I think we forget that because we are so curious and creative as aromatherapists, we forget that it can be simple. So I want to bring it back to that. And I'm going to share with you Dropsmart. Okay, let me just adjust so I see everybody and I see what I'm doing. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk to you about is taxonomy. I think we start there often when we go into some certification, and the reason is, after I analyzed this for many years and took many courses, is I think taxonomy is here to help us articulate ourselves, to help us know what we are talking about. And I'm going to show you here with Dropsmart where this comes very well. So, for example, when somebody says, I often hear, use mint for when you have difficulties with digestion. And this is what happens. Look, which mint are you talking about? Okay. And highly likely they're talking about peppermint, but let me write the Latin name because then it will be better. And you can look just by the colors, they are so different. So taxonomy is great because you can narrow it down. You say mint, but peppermint, and not just peppermint. You don't stop there. You can say the species. So you can speak just like a doctor, they have a common name and then you have the Latin name so that all doctors across the globe can understand you. And it's the same with aromatherapy. And I think that's wonderful. I think that is great that we can all, now I moved to Brazil, for example, and they don't say rosemary. They call it, I think it's alecrim. It's a completely different word, but I can say the Latin name and then we know what we are talking about. Okay, so peppermint is one of those oils that becomes, I think it's necessary that we call it by its first and last name. So, which peppermint? Okay, another one is eucalyptus. And it's not just that whole dilemma with Eucalyptus globulus and radiata. There is a lot of eucalyptus species. So it's super important that we say the first and the last name of it, because first of all, that's going to distinguish us as an aromatherapist, that you actually know what you're talking about. Second, you will not make mistakes. And if you tell your client, use eucalyptus for the respiratory system, they can go to some store and buy the first eucalyptus there. And they buy Eucalyptus citridora, and it's like, it's a very different use of it, very different chemistry, very different safety, everything. So as an aromatherapist, you want to educate your clients about it. I really get, I don't like when they call frankincense Frankie. I mean, it's cute, but it's frankincense and it has a first and a last name. And so I think as an aromatherapist, as somebody who is an expert in a field, you need to use terms clearly, not just to sound smart, but so that people know what you're talking about, so that they don't make mistakes, so they don't use the wrong oil. You think they're using Eucalyptus globulus and they're using Eucalyptus dives. Very different safety, okay? Another one I want to show you, and so this is with the Latin names. So we might have different names for the common name, but then we are saved by the Latin name. But sometimes we have same common name. So with chamomile, oh, I'm going to spell this wrong. See? Okay, so with chamomile, you can see that they actually go into completely different categories, and they're all called chamomiles. So that is why it's so super important that we learn taxonomy, okay? But when we, as aromatherapists, study these subjects, like biology, this goes into usually you learn taxonomy within biology, although it could be separated, in my opinion. We get lost. Where in this biology, where do I stop? Okay, so I want to show you here. I opened one site, and this is old. This is the new version of that site, but I like to show you the old version because this is where I think as an aromatherapist, we can choose to step out of the dilemma. So this is rosemary, and the Latin name for rosemary. But so are all of these. Do you see? All of these synonyms, some more accepted, some less accepted. And there's this big thing about rosemary being angustifolis, Rosmarinus angustifolis. And there's a lot of talk about it. However, I think as aromatherapists, I believe that what we need to do is know about this, know where you can get this information, know which synonyms they are, not by heart, but where are you going to check this info? And in Dropsmart, we have the synonyms in the system. So whichever one of these you write, it should pop up rosemary so that you don't have to remember it. So I think that this is where it comes to taking the load off. I know where this is, but this is not my area of expertise. So if anybody asks me why I call my rosemary Rosmarinus officinalis, I can say, look, here it is. It's an accepted name. You have all these synonyms. You can call it whatever you like. But as an aromatherapist, this is enough. I mean, I need to know the first and the last name. I need to know where I can find the synonyms, but I do not go into the debate, should I call it like this or like that? I should not be using wrong information. Maybe I should inform myself that these are not the best ones, synonyms to use. But I don't need to dwell on it. And I think as aromatherapists, we take this as our thing. I'm not a biologist. It's not about me to debate which Latin name is the best to put. So when I was creating Dropsmart, I was actually had a little group of experts asking them which common name I should put here and which Latin name, because sometimes it's like, is it blue chamomile or is it German chamomile? You know, and it's not up to us to decide that. We just need to know that when I say blue or German, we're talking about the same thing. So I think that this is the first step that I would like to say about taxonomy, and how Dropsmart is going to help you is to perhaps even compare these. Next step is the chemotype. So I believe that as an aromatherapist, that is important for us. It is important for us which chemotype it is. Whereas for some herbalists, it might not be. But as an aromatherapist, it's very important because we're using them as very concentrated substances. So a drop here and there is very different than a leaf here and there. And I try to explain this to some people when they tell me about, you know, consuming oregano essential oil orally. I said, yeah, well, go and eat 2-3 bushes of oregano and then tell me if it's the same thing. Okay, so we need to have this concept that a drop here and there makes a very big difference in our blend if we put 2 drops of rosemary or 1. Whereas as herbalists, if we put 1 leaf of Dropsmart into, isn't going to make such such a tremendous difference. So for us as aromatherapists, I think taxonomy, we need to look at it as being able to articulate yourself. It's part of our vocabulary. But beyond that, I don't think we need to stress too much about it. We need to know when to use what. We need to know what is a species and what, like, we need to know what is this and what is that and why are all these little L's at the back. So we need to understand what it is that we're looking at, where to then check our info on which websites that are reputable, or where to send our client to get more information. But I am not a botanist. I will not explain this to you in detail. It is not my place. also. It is not my place to do so. So once I understood how important it is for me to understand my place, as in my limitations, what they see as limitations, I saw them as freeing me, because I was free of a lot of questions that I don't need to know answer to. I can say, great question. I have studied that. I can explain it, but I think it's better that my colleague explains it to you. And what this creates is also a better communication and better respect and better collaborations. And this for me in my career with the biologist, with the chemist, with whoever it is that I collaborated with, because I would not go into their space and they would not go into mine, but we would help each other understand it better. Okay, so with Dropsmart, what I would love for you to explore and to use to your advantage when you are doing such a subject. So let me go back to salvia. So these are, I don't know if I even showed you, clary sages. That's another one. Okay. So the way to use this to your advantage is when, let's say you're choosing, somebody tells you, I want to use a sage for whatever. And the way I use it is to show them visually these pictures, and it helps them just digest the information. Why this sage and not that? So for this, I would use the comparison tool and compare a few of these sages. So these are all different salvia. See, that's what we're talking about. And then the point is to take the load off of you. You don't need to explain all the details. You need your client to be able to clearly understand why this is the best essential oil for them. That's your job. So here you can say, first of all, look, you can see just by the colors that they're very different in their structure. So that means that they're very different in how they're going to interact with your body. That's all you need to say. You don't need to explain the whole pharmacology behind it. This represents what's in it, and that's why this is going to react different in your body. I think everybody understands that. And then what I'd like to compare to them is safety, you know. So then you can explain, see, this is why I will not use this for you when you're pregnant. And okay, so that would be how I would begin with using Dropsmart. It makes it easier for you to show the client visually in picture that these are oils very different. The same with when they come to you, I want mint for my digestive system. Just click a few mints and show them, look, they're very different. Let's narrow down which mint is the best for you. Okay, but that mint has a first and a last name. Next thing I want to show you is why I always bring it down to chemistry. And this is such a very cool example because there are so many oils that are being distilled now that we know nothing about. We don't know how to use it, okay? But if you go down to the chemistry, and as I said, not into how these molecules look like, you don't have to draw them, but what they do, then I can say that yes, this sage, fragrance sage that we know nothing about, I can tell you that it is going to be antibacterial because it has all of these chemical constituents in them. And you don't have to know how to pronounce them. I don't know how to pronounce most of these, but I know how to use them. So you should always come back to that question. How does this help me with my client with essential oils? And what it helps is how they're going to use it. And I think that's the biggest difference between us and my colleagues at the universities that we work together. They're not particularly always interested in how we are going to apply them. They're interested in reactions or bonds and things like that, but we are not. We are not interested in that. If you're an aromatherapist, right? So we're interested in the therapeutic part. So that's what I want to talk about next, and it is chemistry. When we come to essential oil chemistry, I remember my first class, I was thinking, what is she talking about? Like, what am I doing here? We're coming back all the way to the molecule, which is important to understand. But if whoever is teaching you keeps in mind that ultimately you want to use this on a client. So if I'm talking to you about monoterpenes, I'm talking to you about monoterpene hydrocarbons, I can explain to you about the number of molecules there, but only to tell you right after they are smallest molecules, which is going to help you understand that all monoterpenes, all of these here, are going to penetrate the skin faster. They might oxidate faster. They're going to have a higher note. So that is what is useful to you as an aromatherapist, how you're going to apply it. And then calling it, pronouncing this correctly is not so important. It's good if you can, but it's important how you're going to use it. And I would even skip that completely and bring you entirely down to the molecule. Let's say this one has a lot of. So let's see, which one is it? See, this is interesting. It has a lot of monoterpenes, but none of them dominate. That's a very interesting. I think it has a lot of ketones here. Camphor, see? So there's almost 40% of camphor. So this is all the same component, whereas this is different. So that's interesting for you as an aromatherapist to see that these are all different, that this is not like alpha pinene. This is a bunch of monoterpenes. So you really should look at each individually and how they add up. But this is all camphor, just one component. And that is interesting for an aromatherapist. Why? Because then you get to understand that essential oil is a blend. And you can start looking at it differently. So that you always bring about, how does this help me to my client with essential oils? So then when I understand that this whole bunch of things is a camphor, I can see what camphor does to the body. I don't have to know what a ketone is and which exact bond makes it. It's good to know, but as an aromatherapist, I'm not required to explain to you what a ketone is. As an aromatherapist, I need to know that camphor can do all of this for you and that camphor is potentially neurotoxic. That's what I need to know. And so I hope that this is making sense, that there's a whole bunch of things we learn to understand the concept, but then we can kind of put it in a box packet. I don't need to remember exactly what a ketone looks like and the definition of a ketone. I just need to know what does that do for me as an aromatherapist, and know that it's a functional group and have some idea of what that is. But I don't need to be able to recite to you 50 ketones. It's not our purpose. And I think that aromatherapists forget that because we go so deep into every subject. And when I was pondering on this, I understood it's because each subject was taught by a chemist, by a biologist, I had medical doctors teach me. And of course, they're teaching it through their lens. Okay. So I hope that this is making sense. I would like to take a few, do you have any questions just to see how you're all receiving this? Teacher, yes, for me as well. So you say, for me, it's not only clients, but more as an educator, since I teach quite a bit. And that is so beautiful. I wanted educators in my class because it's up to us to change this approach on how we teach. I took many courses. I took like 10 different courses, certifications, not to finish the certifications, but to see how are these people teaching. And I learned that in most cases, it's the same as in school, like 30 years ago or more. So chemistry is teaching from the chemistry perspective, biology from biology, but then it was hard for me to connect. What is this doing for me as an aromatherapist? And I had luck actually that a lot of chemists liked me and they wanted me in their class to then teach the part of how to use chemistry for in a practical term, because they was super honest. One of my dear colleagues, she's an amazing, amazing chemist. But she told me, Melanie, I'm not interested. I'm really not interested in what to do with it. I like my bonds. I like how it relaxes. I like the studies. But what you do with it, I'm really not interested at all. And she was teaching essential oil chemistry. And that explains why it's explained in such a way. So as an educator, as an aromatherapist, we have this opportunity to teach it from an aromatherapist point of view. So then when it's hard for people to go back to atoms and how they, but you say, you just stick with me through this part, because you will not need to remember this on the test. What you need to remember is that monoterpenes are small molecules that, aldehydes react very quickly. So you might have to be attentive to them because they can sensitize. Those are the things that you're going to have to remember. But as an aromatherapist, you do need to know when somebody says this oil is rich in aldehydes, that you know what that means. Okay, so that you are not like kind of clueless. You need the vocabulary. In a lot of these subjects that we were learning, we need the vocabulary, but nobody explained how do we then apply it as aromatherapists. And that's where the heaviness, then I spent 15, 20 years trying to figure out what am I going to do with this info and when am I going to stop studying, for God's sake. Okay, so the next, for each essential oil group, save for sage, are the esters all the same color and the ketones? Yes. Yes. So this is what I did. I wanted them colored because I'm a creative person and need things in color to understand them. Only for hydrocarbons and alcohols, I separated the color because we would learn that way in school, again, in aromatherapy education. You would learn about monoterpenes and you would learn about sesquiterpenes. Then you would learn about monoterpene alcohol and sesquiterpene alcohol. But then you would come to aldehydes, ketones, and nobody would talk about monoterpene aldehydes or monoterpene ketones. So you have that in Dropsmart. You have it classified if you know how to use that. But the colors are always for all aldehydes, light green, for all alcohols. Monoterpene alcohols are red and the rest are pink, so that you can kind of see right away what you're doing. I thought monoterpenes really need their own colors because they are so much lighter than other molecules. There's a lot. It's good to notice them. I think we have a long way ahead to really put in common what aromatherapy really is. Yes, it's true. Don't feel that you're behind in your country, because this is my third continent I live in, and I taught in many countries, and each have their own point where they're stuck. So aromatherapy in general, and I shared this in my emails, is new. You know, the term aromatherapy was coined in 1930s. It's less than 100 years ago. So you have to understand that, of course, we don't have unity yet, because everybody who was allowed to use essential oils was not aromatherapist. It's only like 30 years that we actually are able to say, or not even, like I created the national vocations in Slovenia, I don't know, less than 5-7 years ago, that I was allowed to say I'm a aromatherapist in a country that I worked as an aromatherapist for like 15 years. So, so you're fine, and it's great that you're here, because I feel we are ready to have our own perspective. And I was always looking for that unity, and that's why I'm sharing this with you, because it dawned on me a month ago, is that what always helped me was that I looked at how does this help my client, but with essential oils. We can all agree, no matter where we are, is that we're helping somebody, and it's with essential oils. And so everything that I do, everything that I create, that I teach, is with that question. If it goes out of that scope, it's not aromatherapy anymore. You could include it like base oils, like hydrolats, like macerated oils, but you don't have to. That's the thing. You don't have to. As an aromatherapist, you need to master your craft. And I think we haven't agreed on what mastering essential oils is. And we have a lot of things to do there. So it's kind of like going into space and we still have trouble here on Earth getting together. Like, let's get our stuff cleaned up first. So you can search by a molecule. That's another question. And where you search by a molecule, you can look at all the molecules within this particular essential oil here. And wherever you are, it depends on your browser. You have, on Macintosh, it's Command F or something F, and then you can write here and look for, I don't know, alpha pinene, and it will look for that word. So this is the way you can search through anything, not just chemical components, but whatever you're looking for. However, in Dropsmart, if you go to the catalog, in the advanced filter, you have here, and you can look for any component. So you can look for whatever you want. Linalool. I like linalool. Most people like linalool. And then you can search it at a certain percentage. So all essential oils that have over 15% is significant already, I think, for linalool, because such an intense smell. Look how many oils have over 15% of linalool. So that's where the fun comes. So you can look for like 100 oils with over 15% of linalool. And this is, I think, where the shift in perspective changes. If you stop looking at it from a essential oil profile point of view, which comes from pharmacology and botany, right? And we start looking at it from a molecular point up, then you will actually see what happens to a lot of my students is they realize I'm using the same oil, that they like oils that have the same components. And then it starts making sense because you're looking at the essential oil, and essential oil is a little cocktail. It already is a little blend. But because herbalists and we were taught in a way to look at the plant first, then we were learning things about lavender, and then we're learning things about rosemary. But for us, it's very important which rosemary, which lavender we're talking about. It can tell us so much more. If you like this feature, you're gonna love that you can look for more. So here we have linalool 15%, but you can also say linalool and limonene, for example. And so I want all oils that have at least 15% of linalool and 5% or more of limonene. And then it narrows it down for you even more. So you can play a lot if you like that. Okay. So you can see how they really come together. I can put a little bit less, and then you can say, okay, maybe that's too much, or I want more. So you can play. You can also search for chemical groups. So you might want to search just for monoterpenes. This is what I do when I'm looking for a high note. So I look for an essential oil that has 50 or more % of monoterpenes, and those are all have high, because monoterpenes are going to give you high note. So then you can search just for oils that have a lot of monoterpenes, and that's going to tell you oils that have high notes, oils that are going to oxidate more quickly. You can learn so much more this way as an aromatherapist than learning each subject separately. And I learned that you have to bring it down to the molecule. I know we don't like to hear this. And I think the reason we don't like to hear it is because we think chemistry, ooh, I'm going to have to, learn bonds and stuff. It's not. It's not. As an aromatherapist, we need to know what these molecules are telling us, how to use it on our clients safely, wisely, and make it easier for us. Isn't it easier for you to look for oils, let's put it even more, for oils that have, let's say, 70% monoterpenes? And with certainty that these are all high notes. Isn't that so much easier than learning juniper, maybe a high note? Because no, if you ask a book, some people put juniper in the low note, some they put it in the middle note, that's because of these sesquiterpenes, but you know that most of it is monoterpenes, and that's a high note. It's a chemical, it's a fact. You cannot argue with that. So, isn't it so much easier to just look at oils that have a high percentage in monoterpenes and not need to remember that these are high or low notes? By the way, notice our Frankie here. It's a high note, people. It's a high note, not a low note. And this is because we are reading the books made for herbalists, and they're looking at the resin. They're not looking at what the distilled resin looks like, okay? So it does have some of those lower notes, the lower, heavier molecule here, but most of it is monoterpenes, okay? So, so it's the perspective. It might feel overwhelming now, but if it feels overwhelming, it's only because it's such a wildly different perspective than you have been listening to your aromatherapy career. Actually, we want to break it down to the most simplest form, and then you can understand everything from here. And lastly, I want to touch on energetics. So are there any more questions here before? Because I can talk about this all day, every day. So just to keep me aligned with what you would like to know. No, I can keep going. Just to write in the comments, is it overwhelming for you? Is it mind-blowing, or is it boring? Or like, just give me some feedback, please, because I have been working with this kind of perspective for decades, and I couldn't articulate what it is that is my perspective. Why is it so different? And now I know. And so I would like to know, and then I understand also why people are confused when I talk. It's because it's a completely different perspective. I'm always looking at, why is this relevant to me? Why is this what don't I need to remember, actually, as an aromatherapist? Who can I point to explain that, so that I don't have to, because it's none of my business. Okay. Lastly, yes, I hear you. We can just go on chatting, right? So, lastly, I want to address energetics. So here's our Frankie here, looking at me. Hello, frankincense. Another one with a lot of different Latin names, okay? None of our business. None of our business. And then you're going to have asking a question about species. Sometimes they do not agree on it, okay? So it's not our fault. They just do not agree on, is this a new species or a subspecies, or is this, it's none of my business, okay? So if somebody asks me about species, I'm going to point them in the right direction of a qualified biologist or a taxonomy expert that can explain to them why this oil has 15 names and why they agree only on 3. It's not my issue. I want to help somebody with a respiratory system with this essential oil, and what's going to help me is know how to name it, that I bought the right oil, and know what's in it, not so that I can be all fancy on how many molecules it has, but so that I know, aha, really, this oil does have all these constituents are antibacterial, so great, I have a bacterial infection, and that's going to help me. Okay, so you can go deeper into that. I always think, I mean, I love books and I love studying, but studying for pleasure, not because I feel inadequate. That's what I would like you to feel, that you are perfectly adequate as an aromatherapist. You do not need to know all the species and all their issues. You can, however, if that interests you. So when we talk about using essential oils on an energetical level, spiritual level, okay? I always had this question, how do I know that this opens my third eye? Who says so? Okay. So one of the things that I noticed that my clients and my students, my audience, 'cause not everybody was my students, I guess, who was in the audience of many of my lectures, they always appreciated when I said this was a scientific study. Okay, so here you have scientifically proven properties and who did that. And then anecdotes. I used this on my mother-in-law and we had a smooth conversation. They could try it, but it wasn't my mother-in-law in our circumstances. Or somebody's experience versus somebody's intuition. So somebody who had this experience by an intuitive input. All valid, all valid. Okay, so this is Madeline's experience. She uses it for spiritual confusion. And then in her book, you can read what she actually means by that. And for all sorts of very questionable things. Okay, so this is how she uses it, and it's her experience. And I know Madeline personally, she has hundreds of patients that she worked with. So for me, I trust her experience, but that's me. So this is how you use Dropsmart for this, so that you can articulate yourself clearly, and not only what's the first and the last name of this essential oil, but also it's very important when you speak to your audience, this is a scientific study. This is from books. And who wrote that book? This is a nurse. This is a pharmacist. She's an aromatherapist who is interested in perfumes. This is a nurse who's also an aromatherapist. Very different perspective, but they all came to the same conclusion that it's for asthma. Now, still you can choose if that's enough info for you or not. Okay, so in that way, I would always respect my audience, my client, my student by telling them, look, this is my experience, this is experience of my colleagues, this is what's written in books, and this is a scientific study. Now you get to choose what makes sense for you. So in using it on spiritual level or energetical, I haven't found something that can tell you this is for that chakra and 100%. It's very much intertwined with, for example, Ayurveda or other approaches, but you have to keep in mind that they might have used the whole plant. So when it's distilled, it's different again. So knowing all of that, you don't have to be an expert in Ayurveda to help somebody with chakras, but you need to be able to communicate what it is that you're doing and why in clear words. I think that's where we as an aromatherapist need to start, and why a lot of these modalities that we're learning within aromatherapy are useful for us. However, we should be asking more the question, how does this help my client with essential oil as we're learning that, as you're reading a book? Maybe even ask your teacher. Okay, great. I've been listening to you for an hour, how, we absorb these oils, but how is this relevant for me in my practice? Like, ask them. Ask them, because I've been to many lectures where at the end I felt like, oh, okay, great. I feel I have a lot of knowledge, but how do I apply it? Now, as a little bonus, I'm just going to tell you, and this is my experience on energetic level. that less is more there. For, like, if you're working on a level that's not tangible, I don't think we should be bathing ourselves in oils, because we are speaking to a level of it that is untangible. Okay, so we want to use that level of quantity, and also that, for me, maybe because I love chemistry so much now that I understand how to use it, I found that lighter, the smaller the molecule, it also kind of has an effect on energies that way. This method, particularly here, has that a philosophy of its own. So this is a methodology. Another one, it's his own perception of essential oils, and he says that the ones that have a lot here, chemical constituents, that those are the ones that are used in spiritual things. Okay, so I really would like to hear your comments on this. I would like to just end this by saying, if we just keep it simple, how is this useful to me? How is this useful to my client? With essential oils, you will just see so many things that you don't need to know. You don't need to go into the debate how many functional groups this has, how many synonyms it has, what does that even mean? You need to know how to apply it as an aromatherapist. If you're a chemist teaching this, then it's a little different. But if you're an aromatherapist, just knowing where it's not your place, for me, it helped me a lot. This is something that a lot of aromatherapists also don't know, but a lot of aromatherapists ask me, how did you get to speak at a university level? How did I get to speak to master students? And I don't have the qualifications for it in that area. And to, I don't know, medical professionals. How do you get to do it? And what? I then got really close to some of my colleagues, professors, and I said, so how did you choose me? I mean, you have other, like, you teach chemistry. Why didn't you teach it? And she said, Melanie, it's because you know your limits. It's because you don't go into what's not your area. And then it dawned on me, wow. And so me never overstepping into somebody else's area of expertise is precisely what got me teaching it at places where I wasn't supposed to. Okay, so taking all of that load off of you and then collaborating with somebody who is an expert in that area, that's the way to go. So if you want to work in a clinical setting, but you don't want to be a nurse, collaborate with a nurse. That's what I did. I collaborated not with a nurse, but with an entire hospital. And I got to do aromatherapy in a hospital, but maybe not directly on patients, because I'm not allowed, and that's okay. But there are ways that you can stay professional. You can do it in a clinical setting without being a nurse. However, if you want to do a nurse's job, then you're just going to have to go through the same education. So that, knowing your place, knowing your limitations, and they call it limitations, so it might feel offensive at the beginning, but see it from a perspective that it's just not my area, and I'm really not interested into learning all the bonds that woman knows. I am not interested in that. So thank God it's not my area. I'm just not interested. However, I love talking to her because she can explain things that I don't feel like studying. Okay? So that will help you really be good at what you want to be. I don't need to spend time being a chemist. I need to understand how to use chemistry for aromatherapy and be really good at that. Be really good at explaining to other aromatherapists how to use chemistry to be a better aromatherapist. Not new bonds, not you know, and for whatever area you're studying palliative care, I spent years studying palliative care because that was most information in clinical aromatherapy. I was never intended to be a nurse, but I learned so much from these wonderful nurses so that I could collaborate with nurses and help them do their job because I got to be an aromatherapist. So the less you go into other people's subjects, the more time you will have to be an aromatherapist. And I find that as aromatherapists, we go and we study and we study and we study, and we end up studying things that I did not want to study in the first place because we feel incompetent. But by saying, this is my space, and I'm going to be really good at this, understanding that your limitation is not your limitation, it's just I choose to work with essential oils. I don't want to work with teas. I like teas, but I want to work with essential oils, and that's fine. If you want to work as a herbalist as well, then better present yourself as a herbalist who uses essential oils and studies that. So that is my conclusion. I'd love to hear your feedback. Anybody, you can unmute yourself now. So thank you so much for staying here. I will send the replay without this ending. And I will see you soon. Thank you. Have a beautiful day, evening, whatever. Bye.